Hey folks, welcome back to Game Geeks. I'm your host, Kurt Wiegel. Today's episode, we are talking about the Curse of Strahd. For the D&D 5th, it is an adventure campaign that takes you from levels 1 to 10. It's Ravenloft. For those of you who don't know what Ravenloft is, do some research. My God, know your hobby. Ravenloft initially was a pretty big adventure that was penned by Tracy and Laura Hickman of Dragonlance fame. It was this huge dungeon or huge castle that you wandered around in and tried to kill the vampire lord. And the first thing you had to do, though, was you visited some gypsies who did a Tarot card reading for you. Tarot card reading for you that gave you clues on what you needed to kill the vampire. So, you know, it kind of felt like you had to do three things. It was setting, gizmo, and how to kill him. And you got a different one every time. So the dungeon had infinite replayability. Not really, because let's face it, the pit trap is still going to be where the pit trap is, and you do not want to go into that room in the dungeon. It has nothing to do with the adventure, and just damn. So, but then Ravenloft grew into its own setting, which was the gothic horror setting of D&D. I thought it got better with the last major production of it for 2nd edition, which was this giant hardback book, which actually gave you the option of playing people from Ravenloft, not just you're cursed and you wander into the mists and suddenly you're in a different world. All right, in this, it gives you a distilled version of Greyhawk. There are still mists. However, there's not the multiple worlds, like multiple domains thing that you have to worry about. Ladies and gentlemen, there's one here, and it's called Barovia. And it is a largish region that you can wander around in, get adventures, get into trouble, get out of trouble, and eventually find your way to killing the big bad vampire at the end. One of the nicer things about this is the map that is included in here is really kind of sexy because it's a good picture of Barovia, and on the back side of it you get Castle Ravenloft itself, which is not quite a reproduction of the original castle, but it was a well-done castle. I'm not going to lie to you. It was really well done at the time of the original adventure, and it's well done here too. One of the cooler things about this, though, is you get to focus in on Barovia. You don't have to worry about trying to get into another domain that another Dark Lord holds sway over. And it gives you an idea of the dark forces that contain everything into the setting here. Spoiler alert for those of you that might be playing through it, I really love the Amber Temple, because it has contained in it these amber sarcophagi that contain spirits of dead gods that will give you gifts that ultimately curse you, but they will give you gifts, and they, to the best of my ability to read, they're what's holding Strahd in. They made a deal with them. He's not getting away until he follows up on his end of the deal. The other nice thing is Strahd in this is not just a mindless villain. Strahd pays attention. He has very specific goals he wants to. Initially, your characters are off his radar because you're like, what, 2nd, 3rd level adventurers wandering around, what the hell are you going to do to Strahd? But by the time you get up there and the time you start mucking around in things he likes, he's paying attention to you. And that's not necessarily a good thing. Host of NPCs contained herein. The adventure itself it's linear, but it's not railroady. It's like most adventures where you start out here, you do a bunch of mini quests for these people until you level up enough that you can move on to this place. More mini quests, you get into more of the plot here. It moves on further and further, for example. I really like this. I don't like Ravenloft. I didn't think Ravenloft was ever very good at doing horror, but I was a Call of Cthulhu snob. I think horror can be done in D&D, but I sort of feel like horror is sort of like horror with supers. You can do all this amazingly powerful shit. What are you scared of? Horror is about being powerless, being trapped. You got a speedster. You don't trap them easy. Yes, there are all these things you can do, but they feel very, very much like artifice rather than anything natural. I love this book. Honestly, it is well done. It is well put together. And like the rest of these, it's very interesting to me that some of the rest of the books we've been talking about are made by, or at least co-produced by companies that are not Wizards of the Coast. For example, Princes of the Apocalypse was co-made by Sasquatch Game Studios. The Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide was also co-produced by Green Ronin. Now, Curse of Strahd, I should correct myself from what I said earlier, is produced solely by TSR. I just said it, folks. I've gone all this time, and first time I've slept and said TSR. For those of you who don't know what TSR is, read a book! Go back and learn the history of your game. I'm sorry, my grognard is showing. Let me fix that. Produced by Wizards of the Coast. What they're doing as they go along is they are recreating very classic adventures that have a strong memory and for older gamers like myself. So Temple of Elemental Evil became the Princess of the Apocalypse. The Ravenloft became Curse of Strahd. One coming out this fall is Against the Giants, with the serial numbers filed off. So I love how they're redoing these for a really much bigger appeal. Much bigger appeal for everyone. The one that I'm curious about if they're going to do, and I don't have an opinion one way or another, I mean, I'll admit the older gaming me would be like, squee! If they did this, is the original Dragonlance modules redone in 5th edition for you to go through those. But honestly, I kind of feel like Margaret Weiss Productions did the best job for that with 3.5 in their Dragons of Autumn, Dragons of Winter, Dragons of Spring series of books that they did. Those were the cleanest, the most well held together, but this is Wizards. You never know what they're going to do next. Curse of Strahd, if you want dark gothic horror, if you want to really delve into what makes Ravenloft, it's pretty dungeon crawly, but let's face it, it's Dungeons and Dragons. If it wasn't some level of dungeon crawly, we'd be calling it Game of Thrones. So for Game Geeks, I'm your host, Kurt Wiegel. Good day and good gaming.